So what's the biggest personal sacrifice you've ever made? For something you really believed in, something you knew deep down was right, even if it felt, well, impossible.
Mm.
And looking back now, was it worth it? All of it.
That really makes you think, doesn't it? Because conviction, uh, it often pushes us way past our comfort zone, sometimes into places that feel really unsettling.
Absolutely. And that's pretty much exactly where we're going in this deep dive today.
Mm.
We're going to unpack how God sometimes calls his people, his servants, to make these huge, significant personal sacrifices.
Yeah, often in ways that just completely fly in the face of cultural norms, right?
Totally. And we're kicking off with maybe one of the toughest, honestly, most heartbreaking commands ever given to a prophet. Jeremiah's call to celibacy.
Right. And to really get the weight of that, we kind of have to step into Jeremiah's time. He was ministering during King Jehoiakim's reign, roughly 609 to 598 BC.
Okay.
And this wasn't, a peaceful time. Not at all. The threat of Babylonian invasion was real. It was looming. Exile felt inevitable.
So society was basically on the edge.
On the brink of complete destruction, deportation, understanding that heavy historical backdrop is just crucial to grasping how radical, how almost counterintuitive God's command to Jeremiah really was.
Okay, so God speaks to this prophet Jeremiah living in these incredibly dark, uncertain times. And he gives him this really specific directive in Jeremiah 16, verses 1 and 2. It says, "The word of the Lord came to me. You shall not take a wife, nor shall you have sons or daughters in this place."
Hmm.
First off, what's the significance of that phrase, "the word of the Lord came to me"? And what kind of shockwave would that command about marriage send through that culture?
Well, that phrase, Dabar Yahweh, in the Hebrew, it's like bedrock prophetic language. It means direct, unmistakable divine revelation. This wasn't, a gentle suggestion or Jeremiah's own idea.
No ambiguity.
None. It was a command from God. And then you layer on the cultural context. I mean, in ancient Jewish society, getting married, lakatisha, literally to take a woman and having kids, benem ubanot,
Yeah,
that wasn't just like a nice to have.
it was expected. Essential.
Absolutely essential. Seen as a huge divine blessing, God's favor, really. And socially necessary, for continuing your family line, your legacy. So staying unmarried,
Hmm.
not having kids, that was really unusual, often seen as tragic, maybe even like a curse.
Wow. So for Jeremiah, being told to give up marriage, children, family legacy, it wasn't just painful personally, it would have been incredibly isolating socially, right? A public stigma.
Definitely. His whole life becomes this sort of public question mark.
But then God adds that little phrase, "in this place, Bamakom Haza." How does that specific detail connect back to the whole impending doom scenario you described?
Ah, yes. That's where the command, it shifts a bit. It's still
Yeah.
incredibly painful for Jeremiah, obviously. But it also becomes this profound act of, well, divine mercy. Strange as that sounds.
Mercy, how so?
Because children born right then, in that specific time, in this place, they were facing unimaginable horrors. Starvation, disease, violent death because of the judgment that was coming. So God's command, as gut-wrenching as it was for Jeremiah personally, was actually sparing him and any potential wife and kids from experiencing that suffering firsthand. It's a heavy thought, isn't it? That sometimes not receiving a blessing can, in God's view, actually be an act of love.
So his celibacy, this massive personal sacrifice, wasn't just about him. It became his symbol.
A living, breathing symbol. Yeah, a symbol of the devastation coming. His entire life, just by how he lived it day to day, became a kind of living sermon, a constant, silent, painful reminder to everyone around him of the judgment that was on its way.
A walking, talking prophecy almost.
Exactly, embodied in him, a walking signpost of doom. And, the sacrifices didn't actually stop there. It wasn't just celibacy.
Right, you mentioned social isolation too, Jeremiah 16, verses 5 to 9. He's told not to enter a house of mourning or a house of feasting. What did that mean practically?
It meant total separation. I mean, think about it. No weddings, no funerals, the basic community gatherings that mark life's biggest moments.
He couldn't share in joy or offer comfort.
Nope. Completely cut off from the normal rhythms of social and even religious life. You can almost feel the loneliness radiating from the text, can't you?
Yeah, it's palpable. A profound, God-ordained loneliness.
His very existence became a living picture of the desolation that was about to hit the land. The message was clear. Joy is ending. Celebration is over. Mourning will be everywhere. But you, Jeremiah, you stand apart even from that. His life was the stark, daily, visual aid for the coming judgment.
The mental strength required for that. just living that alienation day after day because God said so. It's staggering.
It really is.
So Jeremiah's life was this incredibly painful living sermon. But as you said, his wasn't the only way God used these kinds of radical sacrifices. What other unexpected forms did this take? Let's talk about Hosea. His sacrifice involved, well, maybe something even more intimate and publicly difficult.
Yeah.
Get verse.
Oh, Hosea. Yeah.
Hosea 1, verses 2 and 3.
Yeah.
God tells him, take to yourself a wife of whoredom, Gomer. I mean, what on earth was the purpose behind such a shocking command?
It's really quite something. God essentially uses Hosea's most intimate relationship as a public parable. The whole point was to vividly symbolize Israel's unfaithfulness to God, their spiritual adultery, basically.
But the personal cost for Hosea.
Oh, immense. Imagine the public shame, marrying someone known for prostitution, the deep emotional agony of her repeated betrayals, the humiliation.
Yeah.
His marriage became this living metaphor for God's own covenant love for Israel. It required Hosea to show this incredible faithfulness, this unwavering love, despite Gomer's repeated, heartbreaking unfaithfulness, just like God's love for Israel despite the constant turning away.
Wow. That's heavy. And then there's Ezekiel, another really tough one, Ezekiel 24. God tells him his wife is about to die.
Yeah, announces it in advance.
And then commands him, do not mourn or weep or shed any tears. I mean, not being allowed to grieve your own wife, that sounds almost unbearably cruel.
It's an incredibly powerful example of personal anguish being suppressed for a divine purpose. The symbolism was just devastatingly clear.
What was it symbolizing?
Ezekiel's very public lack of mourning was meant to represent how stunned, how utterly devastated Israel would be when Jerusalem finally fell. The shock would be so great, the catastrophe so overwhelming, they wouldn't even be able to engage in the normal public rituals of grief.
So his private sorrow was denied a public outlet.
Exactly. Forced to embody this profound, silent grief for his beloved wife, all for the sake of driving home God's message. The obedience required there is just breathtaking.
And then there's Isaiah. Isaiah 20. He's told to walk around naked and barefoot for 3 years.
Wow.
3 years. In a culture where public nakedness meant total shame, captives. What was that about?
It was pure, unadulterated public humiliation. Not just physical discomfort, which must have been considerable, but a complete stripping away of dignity.
His body became the message.
Literally. A stark, undeniable visual prophecy. It screamed the coming fate of Egypt and Cush louder than any words could. They, too, would be led away captive, shamed, exposed. It just shows Isaiah's incredible dedication, willing to endure that kind of ridicule and sacrifice his dignity for 3 whole years to deliver God's warning.
Okay, let's shift to the New Testament. John the Baptist, Matthew 3 and Luke 1, describe his really radical lifestyle. Living out in the wilderness, the locusts and wild honey diet, the Nazirite vow, no wine, no strong drink. How did his whole way of life serve God's purpose?
His entire existence was a deliberate break from normal society, from its comforts. He cultivated this social separation, a life of stark simplicity. Everything about him, his clothes, his food, where he lived, it all pointed towards preparing the way for the Messiah.
A call to repentance.
An urgent call to repentance, yeah. And ultimately, of course, he made the ultimate sacrifice, giving his life for speaking God's truth even to King Herod. His life was this powerful, embodied sermon of preparation and prophetic courage.
And then, of course, there's Paul. We know from 1 Corinthians 7 he chose to remain unmarried for the sake of ministry. And then in 2 Corinthians 11, he gives that incredible list, that catalog of suffering, beatings, shipwrecks, imprisonments, dangers.
An astonishing list.
But how did he see all that? All that immense sacrifice and suffering? What was his perspective?
Paul's perspective is, I think, really key for us. Beyond just the physical pain, he endured huge emotional costs to constant worry for all the churches he planted, the sting of betrayal from people he trusted.
Yeah, that's often overlooked.
It is. But Paul's view on all of it was radical. He basically called it all light momentary affliction.
Light and momentary. Seriously, after all that.
Seriously, when he compared it to the eternal weight of glory and the massive importance of spreading the gospel, it just paled in comparison. What's fascinating is how he completely reframes suffering. It's not just something to be endured, it's redefined as temporary, almost insignificant, next to the ultimate goal and the eternal reward.
He wasn't just putting up with it. He was seeing it through a completely different lens.
Exactly, redefining it.
Okay, so we've looked at Jeremiah, Hosea, Ezekiel, Isaiah, John, Paul, all these incredible radical sacrifices where God essentially turned their lives into living messages. What does all this mean for you listening right now? What are the big takeaways for modern Christians from these powerful, maybe even disturbing stories?
Well, first, I think these prophets really show us that God's calls aren't always just about, adding a few religious tasks to our to-do list. Sometimes it's about a fundamental redefinition of what we value most.
It's deeper than just giving something up.
Exactly. It's not just a sacrifice of something, but sometimes a surrender of our very idea of ourself or self-conception. Like, think about Jeremiah again. His call to celibacy wasn't just giving up a family. It fundamentally challenged the whole cultural definition of a successful, blessed life of lineage. His life became this embodied counter-narrative to his culture, pointing to God's coming judgment instead.
So God might ask for a piece of our identity, maybe, asking us to live in a way that pushes back against what our culture says is important, reorienting our whole understanding of what a good life even looks like.
Precisely. Which implies that God's call, whatever it is worth any sacrifice, because following it might actually shift our very definition of what worth means. So maybe the question for you is, what aspects of your life, your identity, your values might God be inviting you to reevaluate or even redefine for his purposes?
That's a challenging thought.
It is. Second point, symbolic living. It can be an incredibly powerful, even prophetic form of ministry. Our lifestyle choices, the way we actually live day to day, can communicate God's truth, sometimes way more effectively than just talking about it.
Okay, give us a modern example.
Well, think about someone living in a really materialistic culture, right? Lots of pressure to consume, to acquire, and they make a deliberate choice for simple living. Not just because they prefer it, maybe, but as a conscious, consistent witness against that consumerism.
So their budget, their house, maybe the car they drive or don't drive.
Exactly. Their choices about possessions, or even their lack of certain possessions, become this kind of quiet, living sermon about where true abundance is found. It speaks volumes without saying a word.
So how we live often really does speak louder than what we say. That makes you think, if your lifestyle was a sermon, what message would it be preaching, maybe implicitly, to the people watching you? And how could you maybe be more intentional about aligning it with God values?
Third big takeaway, and we see this over and over with these prophets, obedience often matters more than our complete understanding. God's commands don't always make sense to us right away. In fact, sometimes they seem to completely defy human logic or prudence.
Yeah, that's a tough one for us today, isn't it? We like to have all the answers, the full plan.
We do, and
Yeah.
that's the challenge. Trusting God when his direction feels difficult or unclear. Maybe he's prompting a career change that looks like a step down, or a move that uproots everything familiar, or maybe stepping into a really difficult conversation or reconciliation in a relationship.
It comes down to trust then. Believing God sees the whole picture, the whole tapestry, when we can only see, like, one little thread right in front of us.
That's it, exactly. It's an invitation to radical trust. So the question becomes, how do we actually cultivate that kind of faith? The kind that allows us to obey even when we don't have the full roadmap or understand the why behind it all.
Okay, what's the fourth lesson?
Fourth, personal sacrifice. When we yield it to God, it nearly always serves greater, often unforeseen purposes. Our individual sacrifice can end up benefiting many others. We saw that with the prophets, their hard obedience served as warnings, sometimes leading to repentance, maybe even saving lives.
Can you connect that to today?
Sure. Think about, say, church planters who move their families into tough, maybe underserved urban neighborhoods. They dedicate years, often with very little visible result at first, just trying to build community, share the gospel. Their sacrifice isn't just for them. It's like planting a seed for a whole future community, impacting lives they may never even meet.
So God multiplies the impact. It ripples outwards.
He really does, often far beyond what we could possibly imagine. So maybe think about the sacrifices you're making right now, or the ones you feel God might be nudging you towards. How might they be serving God's larger purposes in ways you haven't even considered yet?
And the final point.
Finally, and this is just crucial, God provides the strength for what he requires. He never, ever asks us to make a sacrifice without also providing the grace, the enabling power we need to actually do it.
We saw that with all the prophets, right? They somehow found the strength.
Every single one of them. They found the strength, sometimes in really miraculous ways, to obey. And that promise from 2 Corinthians 12:9 is for us too.
My grace is sufficient for you.
That's the bedrock reassurance, isn't it? God's calling always comes packaged with God's enabling. So, looking back on your own life, your own journey, where have you seen that happen? Where have you experienced God's strength showing up, maybe surprisingly right when you needed it to step into some difficult obedience?
Good question to reflect on. So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's make this really personal. Take a moment, maybe later today, and really consider these questions. Is God calling you to any specific sacrifices right now? Maybe something unexpected, something that feels countercultural, for His purposes in this particular season of your life.
And maybe ask what fears are holding you back. Or maybe even what subtle, unexamined desires or comforts might be making you resist God's potentially more radical invitations in your life.
Yeah. And how can your lifestyle choices, the concrete decisions you make every day, better reflect God's values in a world that's constantly pulling us in other directions?
And maybe think about who inspires you. What examples of sacrificial service, maybe people you know or stories you've heard, have really resonated with you lately?
And let's think about life stages too. If you're single right now, how can you really lean into the unique flexibility, maybe the focus, that singleness can offer for God's kingdom work?
Or if you're part of a family, what countercultural sacrifices might God be inviting your whole family to make together? Maybe it involves your time, your money, your priorities as a unit.
If you're deep in a demanding career, how can you genuinely, practically prioritize God's purposes right there in your workplace, even if it means maybe sacrificing some advancement or some comfort?
And for those maybe in retirement, what new goals for sacrificial service, maybe using all that accumulated wisdom and experience, is God opening up for you in this season?
Okay, so here's a direct challenge for you this week, a takeaway to act on. Just ask God, sincerely, show me one specific area where you might be calling me to sacrifice for your purposes.
And then be really willing to listen. Even if the answer feels difficult, even if it seems completely counterintuitive or illogical from a worldly perspective.
Because, as we've seen today, sometimes the most profound, unexpected blessings and the deepest sense of purpose emerge right out of those places of deepest sacrifice.